Welcome to Cosmere CliffsNotes, a series designed to help you navigate the intricate depths of the Cosmere. Whether you're looking for a quick refresher on key elements of a book, or are trying to organize your thoughts after finishing the novel for the first time, we are here to guide you through the essentials.
Today, we are taking a closer look at one of the most whimsical, yet significant standalone entries in the Cosmere, Tress of the Emerald Sea.
It's a story that was famously born as one of Brandon Sanderson's secret projects, the first of 4 books he wrote in 2020 when the rest of the world shut down and that guy did the opposite of taking a break. The story was inspired by The Princess Bride, specifically a conversation with his wife Emily regarding the passivity of Buttercup. This sparked a reimagining of the classic where the heroine takes agency into her own hands to rescue the man that she loves.
The novel also serves as a pivotal way to introduce Aethers and showcases the unique world of Lumar, which features oceans made of spores instead of water. This idea was influenced by Sanderson's interest in how the real-world physics of granular materials let them behave like liquids under certain conditions.
Narrated by our good friend Hoyd, this standalone young adult novel follows Tress as she journeys across Lumar to rescue her beloved Charlie from a formidable sorceress, blending significant Cosmere events with Hoyd's artistic storytelling. It features some of the most elaborate world building among Sanderson's novels, and today we'll be walking you through the world, magic system, characters, plot, and why this book matters to the broader Cosmere.
Let's get into it.
The story takes place on a world called Lumar, one of the most unusual and perilous worlds in the Cosmere.
Tucked away in a remote star system, Lumar is defined by its celestial entourage, 12 moons locked in geostationary orbit. These moons are not merely decorative, they are the source of the planet's most dangerous feature, aether spores.
Each moon harbors a unique strain of aethers and continuously produces spores that rain down upon the planet in 12 perpetual falls known as lunagries. These rains blanket the surface in vast, spore-laden oceans. The constant presence of the moons also creates a daily phenomenon called a moon shadow, where the sun passes behind one of the moons.
Picture an ocean, not of water, but of fine, colorful dust. Lumar's surface is dominated by 12 of these spore oceans, each roughly equal in size. The seas form immense piles, highest directly beneath each moon, and gradually sloping outwards towards the border of each sea, where neighboring spores begin to intermingle.
Beneath the seas, thermal vents pump out massive quantities of air bubbles. This seethe fluidizes the spores, allowing the oceans to behave like liquid and enabling ships to sail across them. But the seethe is intermittent. During stillings, the oceans become solid enough to walk on. Ships caught in a stilling become spore-locked, unable to move until the seethe resumes.
Known spore oceans include the Emerald Sea, made up of verdant aether, the Sapphire Sea of zephyr aether, the Rose Sea with rosite aethers, Crimson Sea with crimson aether, and Midnight Sea with the midnight aether. We can also assume there is a Sunlight Sea corresponding to the golden sunlight aether, though no such sea is officially named in the novel. If you're counting along, you'll also note that there are 6 unnamed seas, and nobody's quite sure what those are comprised of.
Lumar's society is pre-industrial, but uniquely adapted to its environment. Ships are essential for trade, navigating the seethe between islands. Few dare to sail, so a culture of gender equality has emerged among the sailors, with crews maintaining roughly equal numbers of men, women, and dugs.
Piracy is a structured and accepted part of Lumar's maritime life. Pirates disable merchant ships using water-filled cannonballs, more on that in a minute, activating spores to trap their targets. After agreed ransom, both parties part ways amicably. These pirates are accepted aspects of the economy, and captured pirates are imprisoned, not executed. However, a darker breed of pirates kill their victims and are shunned even by the other pirate crews. These crews are called dead runners, and if captured, they face execution.
Despite these dangers, humans thrive across Lumar on scattered islands. Some support agriculture while others are barren rocks. The planet hosts a limited ecosystem, rats, cats, pigeons, butterflies, and seagulls, with fish surviving, somehow, in freshwater lakes. There is no life in the spore oceans, although we guess you could count Xyces as an exception.
Lumar is a world of extremes, beautiful yet deadly, chaotic yet orderly, and constantly reminding its inhabitants survival here demands ingenuity, vigilance, and respect for forces far beyond human control. From its spore seas to its sentient moons, Lumar is a planet unlike any other in the Cosmere.
Now on to the magic system, aether spores. What are aethers? Well, what we do know is that they're ancient, invested entities that exist throughout the Cosmere. While they were initially native to a single world, different variants of the aethers have since spread to other planets and can now be found extensively throughout the Cosmere. What makes aethers particularly remarkable is that they existed before the Shattering, and some theories suggest that they may even predate Adenalsium itself. They are ancient, powerful, and believe themselves to be equals in strength to Adenalsium itself.
The large prime aethers that have made their way to Lumar live on the moons and are especially parasitic strain focused on propagating themselves through creating compressed aether spores and sending them down to Lumar. A defining characteristic of aetheric magic is an extreme reactivity to water. Even the smallest amount of moisture, whether from sweat, blood, or humidity, can trigger a violent reaction, as the aether pulls investiture from the spiritual realm and the spores rapidly expand into their elemental forms. However, this growth is not limitless. Once the aether reaches its maximum size, it stops reacting with water and becomes inert.
Despite their volatile nature, aethers are not entirely beyond control. Certain individuals, known as sprouters, have learned to shape aetheric growth. They can do this by using a variety of methods, but most notably use iron tools to pull the expanding material and steel tools to push it. Where have we seen that before?
There are multiple varieties of aethers. Crimson aethers form sharp, deadly red spines, while zephyr aethers generate air that can be used for propulsion and launching objects. Verdant aethers create rapidly growing vines that can restrain enemies or serve as a source of food. Sunlight aethers produce heat and light, making them useful for illumination and cooking. Rosite aethers generate crystalline structures that can be used for repairs or construction, and midnight aethers create shadowy creatures capable of spying and exerting control. Although their effects differ, all aethers follow the same fundamental rule of water-triggered reactivity.
Even with their immense power, aethers possess two critical weaknesses: silver and salt. Contact with either substance drains their energy, turning them gray and rendering them completely inert. The materials produced by aethers are similarly affected, losing all magical properties upon exposure.
And here we need to discuss another interesting anomaly. On Lumar, the prime aethers that live on the moons exhibit a particularly dangerous and unique behavior through their rare parasitic relationship with humans. Infected individuals become what are known as spore eaters, forming a luel bond with a sentient aether. The prime aethers require water to survive, which doesn't exist on any of the moons. So they choose people as spore eaters who they progressively drain water from, demanding increasingly more amounts of water from their host and in return providing near invulnerability. However, this relationship is ultimately fatal. The aether's hunger continues to grow until it consumes the host entirely, resulting in a painful death that typically occurs within a few years. The only known treatment comes from the dragon Zisis, who lives at the bottom of the Crimson Sea, though it must be reapplied frequently to remain effective.
The important takeaway here is that aethers represent one of the most unique and ancient forms of magic in the Cosmere. Their combination of elemental power, biological behavior, and dangerous reactivity sets them apart from other systems of investiture.
Next, we'll move on to our main characters. The story of Tress of the Emerald Sea centers on a cast of vivid and unconventional characters, each shaped by the strange and dangerous world of Lumar.
At the heart of the narrative is Tress, a young woman from the island of Diggins Point. Initially known for her simple life and cup collection, Tress is defined by her quiet determination and adeptness at problem solving. Though initially naive about the wider world, Tress proves remarkably brave and selfless. She consistently chooses compassion over cruelty, believing in the goodness of others even when faced with betrayal. Over the course of her journey, she grows into a capable and courageous leader, deeply devoted to the crew she comes to see as family.
Then there is Charlie, the Duke's kind-hearted but somewhat awkward son. To spend time with Tress, he masquerades as a groundskeeper, a ruse that he and Tress both accept, despite almost openly acknowledging that they both know who he is. When his father sees the affection between the two and takes him away to find a suitable, noble bride, Charlie attempts to sabotage the courtships, but is ultimately sent to the sorceress who curses him and transforms him into a talking rat who calls himself Huck. Bound by the terms of the curse, Charlie, or Huck, must bring Tress back to the sorceress and, like Hoyd, is unable to speak the details surrounding his situation.
Our narrator is Hoyd. He is both telling the story and in the story, which can feel a little bit confusing. The Hoyd telling the story is in the present and has broken the sorceress's curse, while the Hoyd we encounter in the narrative is still suffering from it. The curse strips him of his legendary wit, intellect, and taste, leaving him in a state of nonsensical confusion while impeccably dressed. But despite his impediments, fragments of his true self occasionally surface, and his situation highlights the creative cruelty of the sorceress.
Among the crew of the Crow's Song is Fort, a physically imposing but gentle man who serves as both the cook and quartermaster. Deaf and unable to write due to the condition of his hands, Fort communicates using a magical device obtained through trade with an offworlder. We learn from Hoyd that this is a Nulthian technology, implying that although distant and relatively unimportant in the Cosmere, Lumar is still visited by world hoppers. Fort himself is principled and firmly opposed to killing, preferring negotiation and trade as a way of life. Despite physical limitations, he is highly capable and deeply values fairness and honor.
Ulam, the ship's doctor, is a conjurer from Scadrial, an entity capable of reshaping its body at will if you haven't made it to Mistborn. Ulam joined the crew to keep an eye on Hoyd and has used his shape-shifting abilities to create a body that doesn't need blood flow, which gives him ashen gray skin and red eyes. He has a morbid sense of humor, often making casual offers to acquire or trade body parts with those around him. He's highly skilled and surprisingly cooperative despite maintaining a strict neutrality in general conflicts. His extensive understanding of both medicine and the deeper mechanics of the Cosmere help guide Tress throughout the story.
Soleil, the ship's helmswoman, is driven by a personal quest similar to Tress's own. Strong-willed and fiercely loyal to her crew, she is searching for her missing father. Though she can be quick-tempered, her sense of responsibility for her crewmates runs deep, and she is willing to face great danger to protect them. Anne is the carpenter and assistant cannon master of the Crow's Song. A gangly woman with short hair and a fondness for firearms, she is known for her nonchalant attitude and underlying kindness, particularly towards Tress. However, her undiagnosed vision issues along with her crippling social pressure hinders her ability to aim, often to hilarious extent. With Tress's help, she eventually overcomes both of these obstacles.
Laggart, the ship's first mate and cannon master, is harsh, abrasive, and shaped by a lifetime of mistreatment. His loyalty to Captain Crow is unquestioning, and he often resorts to intimidation or violence. However, beneath his rough exterior lies a man who has rarely experienced kindness, making it difficult for him to recognize or trust it.
Captain Crow herself stands as one of the story's primary antagonistic forces. As the ruthless leader of the Crow's Song, she is feared by her crew and driven by a cold, self-serving mindset. Crow is a spore eater, granting her enhanced survivability at the cost of a parasitic bond with a prime verdant aether that is slowly consuming her. The verdant spores within her body react instinctively to protect her, making her extremely dangerous. Her leadership is marked by cruelty and a lack of empathy, creating a stark contrast with Tress's growing compassion and thoughtfulness.
And of course, there are the crew of Dugs. Hoyd calls the unnamed crew members of the Crow's Song Dugs as a pretty funny storytelling shortcut. There are over 50 minor characters, and naming each one would slow the narrative, so he groups them together under a single, deliberately mundane name. But the joke is that Doug is supposedly a very common name across the Cosmere, despite sounding out of place, and it's made even funnier by the fact that one crew member actually is named Doug.
Beyond the crew, one of the most powerful beings on Lumar is Zeiss's rifle, often called Zeissus, a dragon who resides deep within the Crimson Sea. Ancient, intelligent, and largely indifferent to human concerns, Zeissus is primarily focused on his own research into the ecosystem of the Spore Seas. Though immensely powerful, capable of shaping spores and even curing conditions like the Spore Eaters, he remains cautious, especially when it comes to the sorceress, whom he refuses to oppose directly.
Finally, there is the sorceress herself, known as Ra'ina, an Elantrian and member of the Airi. See Mistborn Secret History for her introduction. She is widely regarded as one of the most dangerous beings on Lumar, infamous for her cruelty and love of elaborate curses. Ra'ina takes pleasure in designing punishments that trap her victims in situations where they fully understand their suffering but cannot seek help. Highly intelligent and deeply paranoid, she has chosen Lumar in part because she believes herself beyond challenge there. Her presence looms over the entire story, shaping the fates of multiple characters and serving as the ultimate obstacle that Tress must face.
Together, these characters create a rich and dynamic cast, each contributing to a story that blends adventure, humor, and emotional growth within the strange and dangerous world of the Spore Seas.
So now that we have our world, our magic system, and our characters, let's get into the plot. Part 1 of Tress of the Emerald Sea begins with Hoyd introducing a young woman named Glorf, a family name, who is known to everyone as Tress as a reference to her long, untamable hair. She lives on the bleak island of Diggins Point, and despite the constant threat from the deadly spores that fall from the verdant lunagri above her, Tress herself finds comfort and happiness there, content with the quiet rhythms of her life. She is thoughtful, kind, and has a deep love for collecting cups, each of which represents a story from beyond her isolated world.
A central part of Tress's life is her relationship with Charlie. Charlie is the Duke's son, and he pretends rather unconvincingly to be a simple groundskeeper so he can spend time with Tress. Their relationship is warm and genuine, built on shared conversations and small, meaningful moments. Although their feelings for each other are clear, both struggle to express their emotions, and much of their affection remains unspoken. Their fragile happiness is interrupted when Charlie's father notices the affection between the two and suddenly whisks Charlie away to find a more suitable, noble bride.
Before he leaves, Charlie promises Tress that he will sabotage every courtship and avoid marriage, and that he will send her a cup from each place he visits as a type of trophy. For a time, he keeps this promise. Tress receives letters and cups describing his awkward and often ridiculous attempts to drive away potential brides, and these messages sustain her hope and connection to him. However, the letters eventually stop without explanation.
A year later, the Duke returns to Diggins Point with his new daughter-in-law and heir, a boy who is distinctly not Charlie. Tress learns that Charlie's plans were discovered by the Duke, who sent him to the Midnight Sea under the guise of proposing marriage to the sorceress. He was obviously captured, and although a ransom demand was received, the Duke dismissed it as a trick and refused to ask the king to pay it.
For a time, Tress falls into quiet grief, going through the motions of her daily life. But eventually, her sorrow gives way to determination. Refusing to accept Charlie's fate, she makes the bold decision to leave her home and venture into the deadly Spore Seas to rescue him herself. This choice marks the true beginning of her transformation from a Princess Buttercup into the hero of her own story.
Part 2 of Tress of the Emerald Sea follows Tress as she begins her journey beyond Diggins Point. Determined to rescue Charlie, she tells her parents of her plan. Though her mother is hesitant, her father supports her, trusting in Tress's practicality and judgment.
Tress spends 2 weeks studying the docks and the routines of the island's inspector, carefully observing how ships are checked. With help arranged through her father, she is able to carry out her plan when the Oots Dream arrives. Disguised as an inspector, she boards the ship. The captain reluctantly agrees to let her on board, allowing her to leave the island.
Her plan quickly backfires. The captain poisons her water, causing her to hallucinate and lose consciousness. She awakens locked in a cage in the ship's hold, where she meets Huck, a talking rat who explains that the crew are smugglers and feared she had figured out their secret and intended to report them.
Chaos erupts when the ship is attacked. A cannonball breaches the hull, and the water inside triggers an explosive growth of verdant spores. Although the crew's sprouter temporarily contains the damage using rosite and silver, the attack continues. The seethe stops, turning the spores into a deadlocked mass. When a second cannonball creates an opening in the hold, Tress seizes her chance.
She frees Huck and escapes by walking out of the Spore Sea. She carefully walks towards the attacking ship, the Crow's Song, while other sailors attempting the same journey die along the way. Some picked off by the attacking ship, others accidentally triggering spores with sweat or blood.
When she reaches the ship, she is unable to climb aboard. With little time until the seethe commences again, Tress bravely and creatively flicks a small amount of sweat several feet away from her, which triggers immediate vine growth, creating a way to climb partially up the side of the ship. From there, she watches the Oots Dream sink as the deadly seethe returns. After several tense minutes, she is finally pulled aboard by the crew.
Once on deck, Tress learns she is among pirates led by the ruthless Captain Crow, who despite allowing the crew to pull her up, initially sees no reason to spare her. Thinking quickly, Tress grabs a nearby bucket and brush and begins scrubbing the deck to prove her usefulness. The crew disobey Crow's order to throw Tress back overboard, and she works until she collapses from exhaustion, marking the beginning of her new life aboard the Crow's Song.
Part 3 follows Tress as she begins adjusting to life aboard the pirate ship. When she wakes, her first thoughts are of Charlie, and although she questions how naive her quest may have been, her concern for him strengthens her determination to continue forward.
As she begins to learn the rhythms of the ship, Tress notices the crew is unusually somber. Huck explains they must be new to piracy and are sewing their first pirate flag. She also encounters the cabin boy, Hoyd, who helps with simple tasks but speaks in confusing nonsense due to his curse.
While exploring, Tress meets several of the key crew members. Fort, the deaf quartermaster and cook who communicates with the magical board and treats everything as a matter of trade rather than kindness. And the carpenter and assistant cannon master, who speaks openly about how the crew turned to piracy to avoid being forced into war. And Soleil, the helmswoman, who is fiercely protective of the rest of the crew.
During her work, Tress is assigned to prepare pouches of zephyr spores for the cannons. While doing so, she discovers a hidden compartment containing a concealed cannonball, leading her to suspect that Laggert sabotaged the Oot stream by firing a cannonball intended to sink rather than immobilize the ship. With Huck's help, she confirms that Captain Crow and Laggert plan to sink another ship in order to bind the crew together by turning them into dead runners and forcing them to sail the more dangerous seas.
At the same time, Tress begins to grow closer to the crew. After a minor spore accident where she blows up her face by accidentally touching a zephyr spore to a bead of sweat on her goggles, she is treated by the Khandra, Dr. Ulam. He is kind and helpful, and Tress starts to see the crew not as villains, but as ordinary people caught in a dangerous situation.
When faced with the choice to escape or stay, Tress ultimately decides she cannot abandon the crew to further violence. She and Huck are the only ones who know of Crow and Laggert's plan to sink more ships. When Captain Crow confronts her, Tress offers to remain aboard as the ship's new sprouter, a dangerous but necessary role that the rest of the crew has refused to take up. Impressed by her courage, Crow accepts.
This decision marks yet another turning point, where Tress's journey becomes not only about rescuing Charlie, but also about protecting those around her and discovering who she is.
Part 4 of Tress of the Emerald Sea deepens both the world and Tress's role within it, layering small, telling details into her growing transformation. After Crow gives her the key to the sprouter's cabin, carefully lined with aluminum to shield the spores from the crew's silver, Tress takes quiet joy in arranging her cups and sleeping in a real bunk for the first time, even as Huck grumbles about the newly acquired cat stalking the ship. Conversations with Ulam reveal that Hoyd has been cursed by the sorceress, confirming the crew's connection to her own goal.
Daily life aboard the ship fills in further detail. Tress quizzes Anne and Ford about the seas, confirming that there are 12 types of spores, and learning that the Midnight Sea is boxed in by mountains, giving the sorceress control over trade and pushing kingdoms towards war. She quietly replaces standard cannonballs with Laggert's hidden Dead Runner ammunition, while also noticing smaller human moments. Anne's visible discomfort when asking to practice with the cannons, but still a secret longing, and Fort's blunt but weary philosophy that some dreams, like Anne's aim or Tress's quest, may simply be impossible. Hoyd's attempt to communicate, struggling out a cryptic reference to 6 stars, leads Tress back to her cabin, where she notices carved lines in the ceiling that resemble constellations. Guided by Huck, she discovers a hidden tin of midnight spores beneath her bed, an unsettling secret he urges her to destroy, though she hesitates.
The tension breaks during the drawn-out pursuit of another ship, ending in a standoff where the spores still and both vessels are trapped. What should have been a routine act of piracy turns chaotic. A cannon strike damages the hull of the Crow Song, forcing Tress and Anne below deck, where Tress experiments her way through using rosite spores and the metal tools to seal the breach just as the sea returns. Above deck, conflict erupts as Crow orders a lethal boarding, only to be challenged by Soleil, who insists they fight for freedom, not murder. The moment crescendos when Crow casually survives a gunshot to her own head, verdant vines bursting from her face to stop the bullet, exposing both her terrifying power and the cost of it.
Driven by mounting questions, Tress turns to the forbidden midnight spores. Forming a Lewell bond, she feels water drain from her own body as the inky substance rises, first forming a face and then a crude imitation of Huck drawn from Tress's mind. Through it, she spies on Crow and uncovers fragments of a larger plan. Research into curing Crow's condition, references to a mysterious figure named Zysus, and hints that this dragon, rumored to dwell beneath the Crimson Sea, may hold the answers. The strain nearly overwhelms Tress, and Huck is forced to sever the connection to save her from dehydration.
Meanwhile, misunderstandings tighten around her. Soleil, convinced Tress is a royal king's mask, draws Fort and Anne into a secret meeting where even Tress's attempts at honesty only deepen their suspicions. When she reveals the truth about the Dead Runner cannonballs and Crow's plan to bind the crew, she inadvertently reinforces their belief that she is a highly trained operative. Unable to shatter their hope, Tress instead leans into the careful half-truths, and all while growing more uneasy with how much she is forced to conceal. Her private conversation with Crow only adds to the unease, though she admits she wants to save someone from the sorceress and leaves with a dangerous bargain, to convince the crew to sail the Crimson Sea.
By the end of this section, Tress realizes how deeply entangled she has become. Trying to save Charlie while protecting the crew, she now faces choices with far-reaching consequences, marking a turning point in her journey. She's no longer simply reacting to the world, but shaping it.
Part 5 widens the scope of the story while grounding it in Tress's increasingly deliberate choices and small details that shape them. When the Crow's song stops to resupply before attempting the Crimson Sea, Tress briefly considers escape, weighing what Charlie means to her and even struggling to clearly picture his face. The decision is taken from her when Crow summons her, forbids her from going ashore, and shares an almost unsettlingly refined tea while discussing life, death, and purpose. Crow reveals she knows about the sabotage cannonballs, but is more amused than angry, framing Tress's desire to save the crew as ironic. Afterward, alone in her cabin, Tress cries, not just from fear, but from the realization that even if Charlie escaped, he might never know what became of her. Huck, returning from his own wanderings, tries to comfort her, and their quiet conversation about childhood, loss, and whether life was ever truly simpler helps her steady herself enough to keep going.
From there, Tress begins to rebuild through careful attention to small, practical details. She revisits Weave's scattered notes with fresh determination, deciphering diagrams of cannonballs that use layered spores and timed water bursts, and begins imagining improvements like structured spore bullets. Fort brings her dinner, revealing, awkwardly, that what she thought were scraps were actually the crew's best attempts at cooking. And through negotiation, she trades her skill in food for better arrangements, including access to a flare gun and a balanced workload. Even crossing into the Crimson Sea is marked by growth. Tress finds herself smiling at the terrifying sight of red spores and distant rain squalls that erupt into towering spikes, a reaction that both intrigues and unsettles those around her. When Laggard begins her cannon training, his blunt instruction contrasts sharply with Anne's enthusiastic guidance. Anne explaining fuse lengths, aiming cranks, and her simple belief that guns are nifty, while recounting the infamous accident where she shot her own sergeant who was behind her and in a bunker. Encouraged by Tress, Anne takes a shot for the first time in ages, missing wildly, but rediscovering confidence in the process.
These small acts of growth continue across the ship. Tress experiments in the galley, creating meals so good that they move Fort to tears. Then negotiates structured trades, 6 of his meals for 1 of hers. While reflecting on how trade is his way of connecting with others, she tinkers with spore flares, redesigning them to release water instead of light, imagining how they might trap a person the way ships are trapped in the spores. At the same time, she wrestles with the moral implications of her own success. If her plans work, Crow will likely die, and despite everything, Tress cannot fully suppress her sympathy. Even her idle experiments, guiding a small amount of verdant vine into shapes, almost instinctively hint at how much she is changing, her abilities growing alongside her desperation.
Her attempts to understand Hoyd's curse are equally incremental and inventive. Unable to communicate directly, they resort to fragments, spoken words, written letters, even silences, until they piece together a rough map to the sorceress's island. Huck, meanwhile, grows more capable, walking upright and handling tools, but also delivers sobering news. Reaching the sorceress means facing Midnight Essence monsters, an invincible army, and a fortress few have ever survived. Tress refuses to abandon her goal, though she begins quietly considering alternatives, like learning to sail alone to avoid endangering others.
The danger of the Crimson Sea soon becomes real. A violent storm sends waves of crimson spores crashing over the deck, overwhelming the ship's silver defenses. In the chaos, a crew member, Paxton, who once helped Tress aboard and had always been kind, is killed. Tress cannot help but wonder if the small decision of hers might have changed that outcome. When a second storm approaches, she acts with everything she has learned, coordinating supplies, lowering a barrel of water, and leaping overboard to trigger a massive verdant growth that lifts the ship above the deadly spikes. It is not a spontaneous act of heroism, but the culmination of countless small preparations, and it transforms how the crew sees her.
That shift makes Crow's response inevitable. Tress soon discovers Crow has been spying on them through midnight essence of her own, and Laggert violently crushes any thought of mutiny, shooting Soleil and subduing the others. Crow's cruel test of leadership ends with her firmly in control, and she escalates immediately, throwing a letter to Zisis, the dragon, into the spores. A tunnel opens, and she takes Tress to go see the dragon. As Tress descends through a spore-formed tunnel, idly, almost absurdly wondering if licking the wall would trigger a reaction, she reflects not only on her failure to reach Charlie, but on the small things she might lose: the sky, the moon, the simple comforts she once took for granted.
In Zeiss's presence, however, those small details coalesce into something greater. Remembering Hoyd's insistence that she already has everything she needs, Tress draws on her empathy, wit, and understanding of people to reframe the bargain. As Crow formally requests the Pact of Promise, a cure in exchange for Tress's lifelong servitude, Tress draws up her courage and whimsy, and likewise declares Crow to be the offering instead. Both Zeiss and Crow are astonished, and the resulting argument unfolds not through strength but through nuance. Tress presented Crow as a more valuable, resilient, and interesting servant. The dragon, intrigued, agrees. When granted a boon, Tress again chooses the small and personal over the grand. Glasses so Anne can finally see clearly, a new communication board for Fort, and the location of Soleil's father.
When she returns, exhausted, the balance of the ship has shifted. Crow is gone. The crew is free. And though Tress hesitates to claim authority, her actions have already defined her role. Even as she suggests alternatives, like sacrificing herself to spare the crew, others reject them, recognizing what she has become. The path forward is set towards the Midnight Sea, but now it is no longer driven by uncertainty or chance. Through dozens of small choices, cups arranged in a cabin, meals improved, tools modified, risks taken, Tress has reshaped both herself and the world around her, and she steps forward not just to save Charlie, but because she has chosen who she will be.
Part 6 brings the story to its climax, weaving together every thread Tress has been patiently building: her ingenuity with spores, her relationships with the crew, and her quiet determination to do what is right, even when she believes she cannot win. As the Crow song sails towards the Midnight Sea, Tress finally reveals Huck's existence to Anne, Soleil, and Fort, along with the truth of her journey. She left home to rescue Charlie from the sorceress. Though exhausted, she tries to plan for what lies ahead, only to be surprised when others arrive in her quarters with ideas of their own. Fort suggests adapting her spore-based inventions into weapons capable of immobilizing the sorceress's metal soldiers, while Huck, reluctantly, admits that certain plans, like climbing the tower, are impossible due to its heavy silver defenses. Still, he hints that there may be another way inside. Searching for a means to survive the Midnight Sea itself, Tress demonstrates her growing mastery by briefly bonding with Midnight Essence, luring it away from Fort with water and then dismissing it. Proof, she hopes, that she might be able to control the deadly entities they will face.
Even here, the story lingers on human moments. Laggert, expecting betrayal, privately asks Tress to simply shoot him now rather than wait for the inevitable, only to be shaken when she refuses and offers mercy instead. That fragile sense of progress collapses when Tress discovers their supplies have been sabotaged. Hoyd, under Huck's urging, has thrown food and water overboard to prevent the journey. Huck insists that he did it for her own good, causing Hoyd to reflect that he once said those words to 16 other people, the Shattering. And Tress, hurt and furious, cages him. Yet even this betrayal proves meaningless in the face of the crew's resolve. The so-called Dougs agree to press on regardless, surviving on verdant vines if necessary. For Tress, however, the loss cuts deeper. Her plan depended on Huck's help to enter the sorceress's tower, and without it, she begins to doubt whether she ever had a chance at all.
Her uncertainty grows as she confides in Ulam, fearing not just failure, but the weight of disappointing those who believe in her. Ulam jokes that no one expects her to beat the sorceress, so they won't be disappointed when she loses and the sorceress kills them all. He also reassures her that the crew follows her not out of blind hope, but because she offers them something they need, a chance at redemption after the deaths Crow caused. He also suggests that Hoid, mysterious, powerful, and cursed, may be the true key to defeating the sorceress, even hinting that Hoid's curse may have been accepted intentionally. Clinging to this possibility, Tress makes a difficult choice. She will go alone. Despite the crew's protest and Soleil's alternative plans, Tress refuses to risk their lives further. Only Huck, his voice carrying something newly vulnerable, convinces her to take him along.
After hours of rowing across the midnight sea, a massive midnight essence shaped like a serpent emerges from the darkness. Tress attempts to control it, but fails, and in the moment before it strikes, Huck commands it instead. The truth follows quickly. Huck is not merely a companion, but a servant of the sorceress. As they arrive at the tower, Tress sees the awakened metal men on the island who form the sorceress's army. As she stares up at the tower, she notes that it has more silver than she's ever seen before, and as she and Huck enter, the door locks behind them.
Inside the sorceress's tower, Tress sees an Aeonic symbol on the ground. She walks up the stairs and enters a circular room with a map of Lumar on the ground, and sees the sorceress casually typing on her laptop. The sorceress casually insults and dismisses Tress, then surprisingly seems to change her mind and offers to release Charlie in exchange for Tress's cups. Tress is thrilled to have Charlie back, but has grown too much on this journey to accept fortune without suspicion. She realizes that it is not actually Charlie and runs up the stairs to Huck, revealed at last to be Charlie himself, transformed into a rat by the sorceress's curse. Every small inconsistency falls into place. His evasions, his stammering attempts to speak, even his name, Huck, a broken fragment of Chuck. Charlie confesses he tried to keep Tress away, knowing that the only way to break his curse was for her to come to the sorceress, and that doing so would place her in danger. Charlie apologizes for bringing her there, and as the sorceress explains that breaking one curse requires another, the story cuts away to the crew, demonstrating that Tress's influence has already changed everything.
In her absence, the crow's song did not retreat. Instead, the crew enacted a plan worthy of Tress herself. Fort bargains with Midnight Essence, offering barrels of water in exchange for protection, turning the deadly creatures into uneasy allies. Soleil pilots the ship with precision through the treacherous Midnight Sea, while Anne, now equipped with corrective lenses and growing confidence, fires Tress's redesigned spore cannonballs, immobilizing the sorceress's metal soldiers despite her imperfect aim. Even Laggert contributes, guiding Anne's shots with practiced calm. Through it all, Tress manages to communicate warnings via Fort's board, which the sorceress had hacked, and warns them about the rocks surrounding the island.
Back in the tower, Tress is held helpless. She confronts a truth that she has long avoided. She never truly believed she could win. Her earlier successes had felt like anomalies, and now, facing defeat, she finds a strange clarity. Watching her design succeed through the tower's display, seeing her friends fight for her, she understands that victory was never hers alone. While Charlie struggles to open the door, blocked by a stubborn cat, Tress distracts the sorceress, speaking not with defiance, but with quiet conviction. She explains that being powerless is not the end, and needing help is not weakness, and that living as someone worthy of that help is enough.
As Charlie finally succeeds, using Tress's pewter cup to bypass the cat and the stairs, the door opens and Hoid enters. In an instant, the balance shifts. Using Aeons, he shields Tress from the sorceress's curse, revealing the truth. This confrontation was part of a long-laid wager. By reaching the tower, Hoid fulfills the conditions to break his own curse and becomes something more, an Elantrian. Faced with this reversal, the sorceress yields. Tress, no longer the uncertain girl who boarded the ship, demands that the sorceress leave the planet. When challenged, the crew stands behind her, weapons drawn, their loyalty unmistakable.
In the end, the sorceress departs in her tower, which is revealed to be a spaceship. While Hoid adjusts the remnants of Charlie's curse, the resolution is not one of simple triumph, but of culmination. Every small choice Tress made, every act of kindness, every experiment, every risk, has led to this moment. She did not defeat the sorceress through strength or certainty, but by becoming someone others would follow, someone who could inspire help when she needed it the most.
5 months later, the crew's new ship, the Two Cups, arrives at Diggins Point. Having defeated the sorceress and gained mastery over the treacherous Crimson and Midnight Seas, the crew now wields considerable influence with the king. Tress uses this influence to ensure anyone at Diggins Point can come and go freely, while offering generous rewards to those who remain for 20 years.
Hoid modifies Charlie's curse. Rather than being forced to bring the person he loved to the sorceress's home to be cursed, now he has to bring her to her home to be versed. Charlie crafts a poem for Tress and finally returns to human form. The ship sails away under a clear sky, carrying the crew, Tress's reunited family, and a sense of hope and freedom for the future. So why does this book matter?
Tress of the Emerald Sea holds significance both within the broader Cosmere and as a standalone work. Within the Cosmere, it expands our understanding of investiture, the fundamental power that shapes the universe, exploring its manifestations through aether and aeon-based abilities. These developments connect to other Cosmere stories, revealing new ways that investiture can be channeled, shared, and even resisted, which enriches the intricate web of magical systems across Brandon Sanderson's universe.
At the same time, the novel stands beautifully on its own, presenting a world that is whimsical, perilous, and vividly realized. Tress's journey highlights that heroism is not measured solely by defeating enemies or wielding great power, but by cleverness, courage, and compassion. Her growth emphasizes responsibility, ingenuity, and empathy, showing that even small acts, protecting a crew, solving seemingly impossible problems, or trusting another, can have profound consequences.
Ultimately, Tress of the Emerald Sea is a story about the power of choice and connection. In a vast and unpredictable world, it reminds readers that meaning is forged not just through extraordinary feats, but the decisions we make and the relationships we nurture. Whether viewed as part of the Cosmere or as an independent adventure, it celebrates the quiet, clever, and compassionate ways a single person can shape the world around them.
And that just about covers Tress of the Emerald Sea. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any future Cosmere Cliff Notes.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter.